Welcome to another edition of From the Press Box. Today is June 26th, 2017. I am Rob Leonard. Joining me, of course, as my co-host and my brother is Tim Leonard.
How you doing?
And today we're having some interviews on our show. The first one, both involving
legendary New York writers. Let's say it how it is.
Okay. The first one we're interviewing today, Timmy and I grew up on this movie. Many people grew up in this movie. This might be considered one of the greatest baseball movies ever. The book is called The Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, Gary Cooper, and the Making of a Classic, written by Richard Sandomir, who, of course, writes for the New York Times. And he's on the phone to talk about the movie. Its 75th anniversary is coming up, isn't it, Richard?
In middle of July.
My first question whenever I interview an author is, why did you write this book?
Well, it became something of an obsession. It started with about 12 or 15 years ago with just getting really fascinated by the speech, as the luckiest man speech as delivered by Gary Cooper. And the more I got fascinated with that, the more I got fascinated with the original speech by Lou Gehrig. And if you're fascinated with the speech in the movie and in real life, then you got to start being interested in the whole movie. And over the years, I gradually decided I had to write the book, and it was only until I got some primary information, specifically a script and some other documents, that I said, well, now I'm starting to understand how this movie was made. And once I got the contract, I was allowed into the Samuel Goldwyn archives in Beverly Hills, and that was the book in there. Everything I could possibly want was in there.
And Samuel Goldwyn really didn't know anything about baseball.
No, this was a curious baseball movie. It was produced and made by Samuel Goldwyn, a Polish immigrant who knew nothing about baseball, starring Gary Cooper, who had never played baseball and didn't have a whole lot of interest in it, with Teresa Wright, who had never been to a game before and didn't become a fan until she was in her 80s. So, it was a peculiar moment in sports movie history. But in essence, because Goldwyn was who he was and didn't want a baseball movie, Pride of the Yankees really is not a baseball movie. It's a love story and the story of a courageous human being, Lou Gehrig, who happens to play baseball.
The movie was made pretty quickly after Gehrig's death. Was that normal back then to do a movie right after someone's death, or maybe wait a little bit to?
Well, it seems. It seems like that is more the protocol now, because it takes so many steps to get things done. You got layers of agents, you got layers of publicists, you got all sorts of layers in studios. But back then, the based on a true story biopic was not a huge genre, nor was sports a big film genre. So it just happened that Lou dies in early June. The bidding by at least 3 studios starts. It's never very vigorous. David O. Selznick, who made Gone with the Wind, showed some mild interest. MGM showed a little interest. But it was really not much of a market until Goldwyn stepped in and said, I'm really interested, and I'm going to pay you $30,000, Eleanor Gehrig.
Which was a lot of money back then.
It was a lot of money, yeah. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but, Goldwyn needed to be persuaded that this was something worth his while. And perhaps the most important person in the making of the movie is someone whose name is not a household name anymore, but a writer named Niven Bush, who had profiled Gehrig for The New Yorker in 1929 and was vastly underwhelmed by Lou's personality. He, in fact, wrote that Lou doesn't even deserve fans, doesn't deserve a public.
Wow.
Now, this is 29, 2 years after a sensational MVP season by Lou. He was well established, but he was no Babe Ruth in the charisma department. 12 years later, Lou is dead. Bush is a story editor working for Goldwyn. He suggests the idea. Goldwyn says, no, if you want baseball, go to a ball game. I'm not going to make a movie about baseball. It's box office poison. But Bush decides, I'm going to sit Goldwyn down. I'm going to make him watch the newsreels of Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, July 4th, 39, where at the end, Gehrig made his luckiest man speech. They go into the screening room, lights out, they watch it, lights go up, Goldwyn's crying. He says, let's watch it again. They watch it again, lights go up. He orders a deal to be made with Eleanor Gehrig. But what he saw was not necessarily a baseball game. He saw a guy who he knew had died 2 years earlier, saying how thankful he is for the life he's had, even though he was going to die. He didn't know specifically he had 2 years left, but he knew he was ill. He was thankful. No moaning, no groaning. The courage that Goldwyn saw in there was really what made him want to make the movie.
Richard, you from reading the book, you kind of point out that there really aren't a lot of similarities between Gary Cooper and Lou Gehrig, but is it safe to say that one similarity that they both shared was that they both were men of few words? And you know, I mean, Cooper is described as a shy guy who, I mean, it's all over the book where basically his favorite word is yep.
Well, yeah, he got a little sick of being pigeonholed like that, but certainly there was nothing in his career as a movie star that would be quoted like the Luckiest Man speech.
Right.
But back to the similarities, what the Gehrig character presented for Cooper was another character who was a man of quiet dignity, like Sergeant York, like in the future, 10 years in the future, Marshal Will Kane of High Noon, like the lead character in Meet John Doe. These were decent men. And in Gehrig, he saw a very decent man. The only problem that he foresaw was that, unlike Alvin York, who won a Medal of Honor in World War I, Lou Gehrig his memory was so fresh to everybody. He'd only died a year before the movie came out, and only 6 weeks after the deal was made between Goldwyn and Eleanor Gehrig. So he was worried about being compared to Gehrig. The fact is that that's exactly what makes the movie attractive, because he evoked Gehrig so well. No, he couldn't play baseball. He had to learn how to play baseball. No, he was tall and lanky, and Gehrig was incredibly muscular and brawny. Not short, but Cooper was taller. No, he needed the help of Cooper needed the help of the former National League baseball champion Lefty O'Doul to learn how to play baseball. So, but in 1942, there was no requirement that an actor be an athlete who could mimic a recently deceased great ball player. It just didn't happen. Nowadays, you'd never get an actor like Cooper to play Gehrig. He'd have to be able to play baseball more than credibly. He'd have to be on the level of a Kevin Costner or even a Redford in The Natural. You need someone who has a natural affinity for the sport.
Those actors, though, are difficult to find, and I'll give you a tangent here. I did a story on Ron Shelton a while back, and he had told me back then that he wanted to do a sequel, and I'm blanking on the name of the movie, but he played minor league ball. I don't know if you know that or not, but and he wanted to do a baseball film, but his complaint was that there are no actors today who are young who are the size of current baseball players. And he couldn't drop an actor into the middle of a clubhouse of extras that he would have from baseball players, because all these guys would be 6'4" and 6'3" and whatever size, and the actor would be 5'7" or 5'8", and it would be obvious that he didn't belong in the clubhouse.
Yeah, that is a problem. And but whoever Shelton surrounded Costner with in Bull Durham,
right? Bull Durham. That's what I was thinking.
It worked out well, maybe because you assumed they weren't going to be that great because they were minor leaguers.
Right.
But, you look at Chadwick Boseman, who played Jackie Robinson in 42.
He was outstanding.
And he did very well.
Yeah.
He may not have looked like Jackie Robinson, but he was credible enough to do it. But nowadays, if you put up an actor like Chadwick Boseman or Costner, people in sports departments, columnists, writers, others who critique movies have a higher expectation for the actors playing athletes. I think of the difference that Robert De Niro made, the changes he made in his athleticism between really a very, very bad baseball performance in Bang the Drum Slowly to a transcendent performance as a boxer in Raging Bull.
Very true.
He must have had much more of affinity or a much better tutor Raging Bull than he had for Bang the Drum Slowly. But in the mid-'70s, when Bang the Drum Slowly was made, that may have just been on the edge of where people would say, I like Michael Moriarty, I like Robert De Niro. I don't care that they can't play baseball that well. And Moriarty was much better than De Niro. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, you just can't. You might as well just not make the movie, or if you are going to make a movie like $1 Million Baby, Hilary Swank clearly learned how to box well enough to be credible in that movie.
Definitely.
And maybe that's why there are very few great football movies. You can't get too many actors to be like Lawrence Taylor or like Tom Brady.
Right.
It's even an athletic actor would find it hard to be a great ball player. Costner just happened to have it, and you mentioned Ron Shelton. Shelton told me that one reason he made Bull Durham, not only because of his minor league background, but because he hated Pride of the Yankees so much. He said his mother loved it for the love story, but he hated it because he thought the baseball action was just not very good.
No,
and he's not incorrect about it.
Exactly.
But there's so little of it. There's really like 9 or 10 minutes of it, and the faraway shots of Cooper are not of Cooper are really Babe Herman. Mm-hmm. So if you get a faraway shot, you get a credible swing from a very good major leaguer, and you very rarely see the ball connect with Cooper's bat. So there was no requirement for him to be very good, but you imagine a guy who's a right-hander most of his life, who'd never played baseball, didn't have any bad habits to unlearn as a ball player, and he has to, learn how to play baseball in 6 weeks. So you look at the swing he had whenever you saw him swing as Gehrig, it was like a guy still learning. It wasn't terrible. He didn't have to do much else. There was very little throwing and fielding in Pride of the Yankees.
Right.
So if he's judged by his swing, which is
Yeah, but I mean, you look at it, and like you said, Cooper's swing was rudimentary, and it showed that he was a guy who had just started playing baseball, whereas obviously Gehrig had thousands of repetitions throughout his career, and had one of the best swings in all of baseball. So there was obviously there's no way that Cooper ever could have caught up.
No, and if there were a different producer or a different generation, Cooper might have needed a lot more tutelage, or he might not have been there at all. There were probably very, very few Hollywood actors at that time who could have done better.
Yeah, agreed.
We're talking with Richard Sandomir. He is the author of The Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, Gary Cooper, and The Making of a Classic. One thing you go back to many times in the book is notes, letters from Eleanor Gehrig, Lou's wife, basically saying you got the story wrong. First of all, how'd you find all that material? And second of all, she didn't get any say about the script, final approval or anything?
Well, no. She was monitoring the scripts, and I'm sure that they listened to they would listen to her critiques, but clearly, if she had script approval, they violated it, because there are several letters that she wrote directly to Samuel Goldwyn or to Goldwyn through her agent Christy Walsh, where she said where she'd make 5 to 10 points at a time, and she'd say things like, "You can't have Lou being signed in Miller Huggins' office, where Miller Huggins, the manager of the Yankees, is wearing a suit. That would be Ed Barrow, the president of the Yankees." She lost that. She would say, "Well, you can't have Lou hit 4 home runs in a World Series game. Everybody knows that he didn't." She told Goldwyn at one point that here is the speech that Lou made on July 4th, 1939. I have written it down here from memory, and it must be rendered as it is. Especially, you must take special pains to make sure that Ed Barrow is thanked. Well, none of that happened. They did change and shorten the speech. They moved the luckiest